Look, we already know we've got an epidemic of intimate partner violence in this country. I think what this data shows is the depth of that, and that it goes to really not just physical and sexual manifestations of that abuse, but also the emotional, the financial controls and things like that.
Can you break that down? What exactly is coercive control, emotional abuse? Because there seem to be lots of elements to it.
Yeah, so they're not interchangeable terms. Coercive control is actually when someone uses a series of behaviours that are abusive over time against somebody who they're in a relationship with, to dominate or to control that person. And it might be emotional abuse, or it might be physical or sexual, but the whole point of it is that it's in the context of intimidation and power imbalance.
And emotional abuse, that's separate to coercive control?
Well, it can be a part of coercive control. You know, a person that's exerting coercive control over somebody might use a whole range of forms of abuse, and that can be emotional. It can actually solely be emotional as well, and we know that from the death review, that in some cases it was all emotional abuse, and then it led to a final fatal kind of outcome.
Is it sometimes the case that women don't recognise that they're suffering this abuse?
Oh, look, 100%. And I think that what's really important is that this data is about self-disclosed data in a survey. And we really expect when the new data comes out later this year that we will actually see more and more people identifying that they're experiencing. And that's because we've been having more conversation. There's been more community education about it, and more people saying, oh my gosh, that's me. But also less likely to feel shamed in coming forward and labelling that.
Who's most at risk?
Look, we know that young people are at greater risk. Obviously, being a woman is the greatest risk factor in experiencing coercive control, but also people who may have a disability, people who speak a language other than English at home. There's a range of risk factors. One of the things that this survey pulled out was around financial insecurity or dependence, and that's really important because what we're actually picking up is that people who have got less power or are subjected to multiple forms of discrimination are actually at greater risk of being targeted by emotional or intimate partner abuse.
It's not just women who suffer this, men can too.
Well, that's right. And when we're talking about emotional abuse, put-downs, degrading comments, you know, threatening and that sort of thing in a relationship, it actually is quite commonplace in this country. And look, this is happening in everyday households, in our own households, with our friends and our family and our community members. So I guess what this data does, it's an invitation for us to start having a real conversation about, you know, this is happening right across the community. What can we do to address it?
What do you make of the progress in laws being brought in against coercive control in particular? Look,
they're really, really important laws because we need to make sure that the law catches up with people's lived experience of violence and abuse. If we're just catching it when someone might slap somebody else or push somebody else, that's not necessarily going to the hub of what people are experiencing, the most dangerous forms of violence, and that is coercive control. So we need a criminal justice system that actually picks up on the dynamics and the patterns of abuse and the power and control in relationships over time, and not just a single incident, which may in fact be somebody resisting or finally fighting back, as opposed to being that primary victim.
And how often do cases of coercive control move into and progress to actual domestic violence?
Yeah, well, coercive control, we would say, is at the centre of violence. But certainly when we're looking at some of those emotional and manipulative kind of behaviours in a relationship, it does tend to, in most cases, take on a life and, you know, progresses over time to get more and more severe. Most of us, when we get into a relationship, we don't straight away see those red flags. The person is often very charming, you know, very loving, very romantic. It's over time when those behaviours start to slip and start to present themselves that we go, oh, actually, I'm not quite sure about this. This is actually uncomfortable. And then to the point where actually I'm feeling unsafe here. So it can be quite a progression over time.
And if friends or family are worried about someone, what can they do? Yeah,
look, it's really important to know that if you're worried about someone or if you're worried about your own safety, that support is available 24/7. So you can call 1-800-FULL-STOP, which is 24/7 confidential, which is 1-800-385-578. And you can also call 1-800-RESPECT. There is support available, and that's really the #1 step to achieving safety, because everything else can follow from that, and we can assist you on your journey.
Hayley Foster, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having us.
And as Hayley was saying, if this story has raised any issues for you, you can get help by calling the National Sexual Assault and Family Violence Counselling Helpline. That's 1800-RESPECT, which is 1800 737 732.